I think the reality is we got to avoid making the mistake of thinking that we're up against a candidate here. We're not. We're up against a machine.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why people like Andrew Tate uses words and phrases like the Matrix. But it's not necessarily a machine. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are all out there doing well. I know we are pushing these videos out, aren't we? Because a lot of things are going to come out. I told y'all this is going to be a hot summer, not just because of temperature, but because of the things that's going to be happening in politics. I called it, didn't I? And for those of you that keep writing me and all these things like that, telling me that I don't understand that my gift is that of a prophet, I'm not a prophet. If I was a prophet, I would tell you, no, I'm an evangelist. That's it. One who brings good news. That's it. I'm not a prophet. I didn't prophesy this. I didn't predict it. It's just more like just adding things up and putting it together two and two. Things just get hot. I mean, I've watched the world just like you guys have, but I might have just given a different perspective on it, but I'm not a prophet. Anyway, I appreciate every last one of you guys taking time out of your day to view my content. If you are enjoying what I'm putting out, make sure you click this right there so that this content can be circulated within the YouTube algorithm. Also, following me on all these platforms up here and down here is what you want to do as well. Do not worry about the spelling that's there in the Rumble, okay? Don't worry about that. It's supposed to be spelled like that. Appreciate it. Last but not least, double check to make sure that you still are subscribed to the channel, folks. All right, let's get ready to get into this. So, my guys, shout out to my guy, Benny Johnson. He did an interview with me doing his own thing. He is killing it out there on YouTube in the journalistic world. Appreciate you, Ben Johnson. For all you do, I draw a lot of inspiration from you. He sat down and had a conversation with Vivek Ramaswamy. And Vivek Ramaswamy said some interesting things in here that I always talk about, but not in the phrase that he's using it. But a lot of you that has been following my channel, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is 100% true what he's talking about, folks. Check this out.
So please, I just want to set up here. You are the most right man in America right now. You are the most correct man in the country.
I wish it weren't so. I mean, I said this in the Republican debate stage a year ago. The media knows the NBC debate. They roasted me. They called me a conspiracy theorist. And as you know, Ben, even on a darker note, I have worried for a long time. I said this in the campaign trail in Iowa. You were right there with me. It was uncomfortable, even for a lot of Republicans, when I worried they weren't going to let Donald Trump get to that nomination last week. But I think divine providence guided him there nonetheless. And we're in a strong position now. I think the reality is we got to avoid making the mistake of thinking that we're up against a candidate here. We're not. We're up against a machine. And the more we see it that way, the more we understand what's actually going on. I actually just had a good conversation with President Trump. I think his head's in the right place. I think the right answer is it doesn't matter who they put up, right? We stand for our own vision of who we are and what we stand for, irrespective of the machine we're up against. Maybe it's Kamala, maybe it's not, of who we are and what we stand for, irrespective of the machine we're up against. Maybe it's Kamala, maybe it's not. I personally, you're not going to hear me come out instantly just attacking Kamala. I've been plenty critical of her. I just don't think that's the right strategy for us. I think it looks unnecessarily insecure to say that, oh, now that it's not Biden, it's Kamala. It's a machine anyway. And regardless of the machine's activity, we have our own vision. And President Trump, and I think the convention overall, did an outstanding job of laying that out for the country. So we're coming off of, I think, a position where we're insulated from this a little bit. Complacency isn't an option. I did see a lot of people last week celebrating like this thing is over. In some ways, this thing hasn't even begun. But we're in our strongest position if we don't just fret and say, oh my God, it's not Biden. Now let's train the fire on Kamala. It's almost, you don't need to, right? This woman, I've never run for president before. I made it to the Iowa caucus. I got 8%. She was, a U.S. senator with a pedigree track headed there. She didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus of her own party's primary nomination process. So people don't inherently like her. I would say forget training the criticism on Kamala Harris or anything else. Forget that. I think that's the wrong. It's a knee-jerk temptation. It's the wrong way to go. Focus more on the ideals of our founding and why Donald Trump is going to be the person who's going to do that. He picked a great vice president last week, good friend of mine. I think we're in a strong position to focus on our own vision, and that's what I'd encourage us to do.
See what I'm saying? There's a lot to unpack there, isn't it? The whole deal with the machine, saying that we're not running up against necessarily a person, but a machine. So here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I keep telling you guys that. Y'all have to understand who we are together is we the people. It's not about us being individuals as persons, skin, flesh. No, we talking about what we the people represent. We represent a force. We represent a power, and supposed to be that force that's actually driven and guided by the power of God, based off of our absolutely 100% godly, Christian inspired Constitution. Some of y'all know it's not because they were Masons. Not everybody was a Mason, ladies and gentlemen. Not everybody was into that stuff. I'm just telling y'all. But a lot of our forefathers were Christian. A lot of them had miraculous things happen. The Constitution was formed out of fasting and prayer. Don't believe me? Go do your research on it. Anyway, my point in saying that is that when I said that we the people represent not just flesh and blood, but we represent a force, a power that's supposed to be directed, led by God, right? So when he said in this interview that we're not necessarily up against a person, don't look at it as a person, but look at it as a machine. In other words, we need to look at it who is the driving force behind that. Don't necessarily look to a person or people. BlackRock consists of people. The WEF consists of people. The WHO consists of people. Charles Schwab and all them are people. The Gates, the Rothschild, the Rockefellers, the Soros, they're all people. But it goes beyond that. They're doing this thing, but what force is driving them is the question. And whatever force is driving them is giving them intel, input, gnosis, or knowledge on creating this machine that's absolutely 100% putting a lot of people here in America in bondage, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and mentally. Plain and simple. It's easy to decipher. And that's why I said in the beginning, I'm not a prophet or nothing like that. I just see things as it is. But here's the deal. In order for you to say, oh, with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, here's the issue that a lot of y'all don't understand. When the Bible said that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places, what do you think those high places are? What would you consider to be a high place? Your kingdoms. Huh? Do you know what a principality is? Do you know what a high place? Your kingdoms, folks. Your governments. Those are the high places. That's where the spiritual wickedness is. And these people are literally working with spiritual entities to carry out this thing that you heard Vivek Ramaswamy say, that is a machine. Anything that's putting you in bondage, anything that's killing you, anything that's putting chains on you, depression, is encouraging mental illness, they know that the end of all those things is death. Why? Because those things are what we call like a sinful like type nature. Just because it's lawful or just because the whole world is behind it, just because the whole world accepts it, does not mean that it's not sinful. It does not mean that it is right. That's why it says the wages of sin is death. Whether that's physical, whether that's mental, whether that's spiritual, whether that's emotional. Things that are of God should be leading to spiritual health, emotional health, mental health in a good way, a positive way. It should be growth in it, not death. I don't know anybody right now that are doing those things that I just got done naming off that can sit there and say, I'm just the happiest can be. If they are, why are they on antidepressants? If they are happy with their body, all these different augmentations they made to it, why they have to consistently take hormone pills? Why they got to consistently take medication for the rest of their life? Why is it that when they get these things done to themselves that the news is not going to tell you guys about when they get these augmentations done, you know, gender affirmation surgery and all that? Why do their suicide rate increase by 70%? If this is so good, if this is so well, it ends badly, folks. It does. And they're not going to tell you that. Anyway, I got off subject. That was for somebody, though. That didn't cost you anything. My point is, we the people are a force that's supposed to be led by God. Supposed to. Those spiritual wickedness, those principalities, rulers of darkness, those are the driving forces that's behind a lot of these people that are in politics. They're just people that's just taking orders, as we should too. So you're fighting the wrong way. You just need to realize who you are and who you're fighting for. And that side never loses. But at the same time, well, what would you expect something to happen? It's supposed to be we the people to do it. Yes, God was there. God was there with the United States Genesis. What do I mean by that? God was there with us in the beginning when we broke loose from that systemic slavery movement that Britain didn't want to let go of. And we eventually, it took us some time, but we got there. We look where we at right now. Look where we are. My point is, men, great men, black men, white men did this and started this thing from day one that we landed here, folks. I know they're not going to tell you that in school, but we did. We worked together. They're not going to tell you the stories of like Lemuel Haynes or Amistad, or Morant. They're not going to tell you stories about these brilliant black men. They're not going to tell you stories about how the forefathers went to a lot of black ministers and white ministers to help them formulate the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They're not going to tell you that. That's the reason why. They don't want you to be knowledgeable of this. Because if you're knowledgeable of this and you catch wind of it, we as a people can have a good movement, a great movement, knowing that this thing right there and these writers and our forefathers constantly wrote about God and his power and his divine power. They constantly wrote about it. And if they know we catch wind of that, we will also tap into that same exact spirit, that same exact power, and we will have a great movement. But that movement is going to be a movement of God. We are where we are right now foundationally because of God, period. The longest running constitution in the history of this world right now, because it was divinely inspired, whether you agree with it or not. Point being, ladies and gentlemen, get in touch with that source. And then we as a people, that force will be the driving force behind eradicating this evil. Let me know what y'all think about all this, folks, by leaving in the comments below after this video. Don't forget to click that thumbs up button before you get out of here. Double check to make sure that you are subscribed. I am Ty Smith, Modern Renaissance Man, hoping and praying that every last one of you have food, shelter, and clothing. And most of all, I pray every last one of you guys are in great health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. God bless you all through Jesus.